All right. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Harry McCaskill. Welcome back to another ShareWise webinar. Today, we're very, very lucky to have Ashley with us, the Managing Director at TG1, which is TechGen Metals. As many of you probably do know, they're an Australian-based explorer focusing on base metals. Now, I won't take too much of Ashley's pride and spotlight. I'll let him introduce a little bit more of the business, but they're an early stage discovery, and it's very, very exciting. They've got a few key topics they want to go through today, or Ashley in particular. The technology around their exploration, the Blue Devil project, Mount Boggola project as well. But Ashley, thank you for your time. And again, we'll let you sort of take the reins, and everyone, there will be a Q&A at the end. So feel free to drop in your questions where needed, when you've sort of got a few for Ashley, and it should be good.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks, Harry. Thanks for your time and inviting us to your webinar. Harry and listeners, obviously we announced this Mount Boggola EM target that we identified sort of later last year with our geophysics program that we conducted, and that was using expert EM's new 12.5 hertz airborne EM system. We're the first company in Australia to use it, so very privileged. And our key project has been for quite a while, since early last year, is this Blue Devil project. And what's drawn us to this project is largely the geochemistry that has been identified by previous explorers. There's copper grades up to 50% copper, and silver's up to 84 grams per tonne, and gold's sort of around up to 18 grams. And they're the peak values though. So there's 10, 15, 20 samples of those copper, gold and silver that are above a gram and a percent copper and silver. So this EM conductor that we've identified, I'll just bring up I share the screen, Harry. It's the announcement that we announced Wednesday last week. And I'll just concentrate at figure 1 to start with.
I'll let you know if we've got any issues. It should be perfect. Yeah, beauty. You're right.
Beauty. Yeah. So Harry, this intrusive system that we've identified, is that purple image, purple figure, I guess, and the bottom of that. So that's a large intrusive magnetic feature. It's always shown up on the government open file data, but it's always been as low level, and really didn't understand the significance of it. It wasn't until we flew the EM system, the expert EM system, and coincidentally, it's not only the first time that this system had been flown in Australia, but it's also in the history of this project from previous explorers. It's the first time that any geophysics had been done on this project, which we found quite, interesting and surprising, given the known gold and copper mineralization at surface. There's some key structures that run through the project, generally running on an east, sort of northeast trend. And once we identified these EM conductors in the red sort of blobs there, so we it's a large body. There seems to be 3 systems to this EM targeting, and all 3 wrap around the intrusive below. That mag intrusive is roughly sort of 700-800 meters to 1 kilometer below the surface, and those EM conductors are roughly 200 to 300 meters below the surface, and they're sitting above and wrapping around that EM conductor. So that's highly interesting. And those known mineralization occurrences on surface are along strike, and in a couple of places sitting above the EM conductors. It has the hallmarks of a skarn mineralization, and these things you don't know until you drill it. We do have a couple of copper samples at the moment in the laboratory getting retested assay, but ultimately the key out of that is the XRD analysis, and that'll give us the mineral species within that copper, and hopefully vector us towards the style of mineralization that is in that project, and assuming that these systems are mineralized. And I say a skarn system, but ultimately the magnetic core, and often with these skarn systems, have a porphyry association with them. So next stage for us at this project will be, it's a drill ready target. We've got heritage permits that we're working on and getting through at the moment.
Now, in regards to that, I I guess the stage you're at with Blue Devil, you know, what is the current exploration status, and what's the timeline? Obviously, you've just come across some great findings. What's the timeline for this project, and I guess the goals in the next sort of 6 months now?
Yeah, it is a 6-month sort of goal that we're looking at. So the next and the most important one for us is a working heritage access agreement. Once we get that, then we can pre-book and organise our surveys for drilling. But ultimately, the target is drill ready. You could do seismic and more IP surveys, but we've got enough layers of data from geochemistry, geophysics, and multiple layers of geophysics that are all pointing to drill this target. And ultimately, gravity and IP surveys, and should you do seismic and those sorts of things, would all point to the same system. So it is that stage, and it is the next 6-month window that we're looking at. And ultimately, right now, it is the wet season in the Kimberley. It's hot and wet, and if we had a rig there tomorrow, we couldn't drill, I guess, just because of the seasonal conditions.
Yeah, it's pretty unpredictable at this time of the year sometimes with the weather. And in regards to the EM targets you've just found at Blue Devil, how does that differ from other EM targets that you've previously announced and tested?
Yeah, this one's got more layers of geophysics. So previously, when you've had an EM target, it's just generally been that combined with some geochemistry at surface, which has given us a robust target. But it's this magma intrusive, mantle tapping system has come up, and disassociated is the EM conductor. So hence I say it's got that scar look about it.
Yeah.
So there's more layers of geophysics, and it's the structural setting of these major faults that wrap around the magnetic feature, and also favourable geology. You've got these sedimentary limestones and dolomites at surface, which are favourable for skarns once they intrude into these systems.
Yeah, and with those more layers, are you concerned the costs may be significantly higher than expected, or you're pretty able to you're able to forecast the expected costs?
Costs are an interesting one in the sense that fortunately we've got cash at the moment. We topped up last year, so the runway for cash will get us through to the latter part of the year. The cost of exploration in this part of the world, it's $1 million question. You've got your heritage costs to work up front, and given the depth of the targets, literally the top of those EM plates, as mentioned, they're roughly 200 meters. And given the quality of the targets, we would be looking at diamond drilling just to get that quality and accuracy of data up front, and a smaller footprint too, generally on the rig sizes as well. The terrain is challenging, and it's probably part of the reason that these targets haven't been identified to date. But getting back to that depth of this EM system, the largest copper system, globally been found anywhere from surface to 100 meters, and today they're commonly being found around that 200 to 400 meter marks. They're just getting deeper and deeper, and traditionally smaller and smaller. But this is a large system, so the scale of it is certainly up there. It's around 2.5 to 3 kilometers long, the main Blue Devil West setting, and that smaller one to the north, and the eastern one is another large one. It's around 1.5 kilometers. So should they be mineralized, they're certainly really decent systems there, Harry.
Yeah, okay. And obviously, we're talking about Blue Devil a lot, and this, the project there and what's happening there. But if we look at Mount Boggola, what's the current update there for shareholders, and any sort of key goals moving forward in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, and try and get a little bit more of an idea for those shareholders.
Yeah, Mount Boggola is exceptionally interesting. Last quarter last year, we announced some geochemistry and some rock chips that we sampled. And the reason that we went back in and sampled that particular project area in the database from historic explorers, aptly named Northern Star, when they had the projects in the early 2000s, they uncovered a decent copper anomaly. So we've since gone in and validated and had a look at that. And yeah, certainly that's a real target, is a copper anomaly. When I say copper, it's copper, gold, antimony, and iron associated.
Yeah.
And we probably an intrusion type related or fault related system, assuming it's there. So, and that is a granted license and with a working heritage agreement. So we are planning IP geophysics on the ground come March, February, March. Obviously, when it's still, as mentioned, it's the hot and wet season up there. This is in the Ashburton part of the region, near Paraburdoo, south of Paraburdoo.
Yep.
So those surveys are booked. On the back of those IP surveys, targets theoretically generated, and then heritage surveys, and then drilling. And ultimately, again, that April, May, June sort of period, hopefully we're drilling this target. High levels antimony associated with it, and the market obviously clearly likes antimony, which is great to have as a, we said almost as a byproduct. It is the copper and gold here that we are certainly targeting.
Yeah, beautiful. And we've just had a question come in from Josh. I know you sort of mentioned it, touched on it briefly, but the question says, from the last announcement, what could the big purple dome shape below the EM conductors indicate, and what is its significance? I guess, elaborate on that a little bit more for those who might not be too familiar with it.
Yeah, that purple blob is that magma intrusive unit. It is obviously magnetic rich, and these systems, these magma intrusives are generally associated with hydrothermal fluids. Generally, when these intrude and hit those carbonaceous rocks, that's where the mineralization generally settles out, and hence forming these skarn deposits. But ultimately, the actual setting or the unit itself, again, drilling will only test what that is. It is, it's a magma intrusive, and assuming and hoping, I should say, that these EM conductors are mineralized. Quite often, you've got that porphyry association with that magnetic intrusive.
Yeah. And I guess with the magnetic intrusive, was that something you were expecting, or was that something just completely out of the blue, and it's sort of a bit of a surprise to you guys?
I'll just scroll down to this next couple of pages. So on figure 3 on the right there, Harry, that's the region, that's the magnetics that we've flown, but we've also had enhanced. So there's a number of smaller intrusive magnetic features to the northeast of the project, Blue Devil project. They also have coincident copper and gold samples associated around them.
Yeah.
That was probably our initial interest in the project, but realizing or thinking at the time that the lower, deeper feature was probably of less interest until we did the EM. We were sort of expecting EM conductors associated with the smaller intrusives.
Yeah.
So we were pleasantly surprised that big, and those higher magnetics to the northeast, they're much closer to surface. And there's been no EM response in those whatsoever. So they're certainly downgraded there. It's the larger mag intrusive system, which is around, roughly 5 kilometers big, around 1 kilometer deep. It's big. And the mineralization, assuming along those faults, is associated with that, and that's what we're hoping. And coincidentally, as the EM survey was flying, these conductors started popping up, and the scale of them was just become exceptionally interesting for us.
Yeah, I can imagine so. It's sort of there's a fair bit of it by the looks of it. And with the scope and scale of this, what is the plan? What's the plan for the initial drilling programs? Not only, I guess, Blue Devil, but also the other projects as well.
The initial plan is previously mentioned. It's getting this working heritage agreement and heritage surveys booked at Blue Devil. The targets are essentially defined, and now we don't really need to do any more work there.
Right.
Obviously, other than test work, XRD work that we're doing, so that's probably about 5 or 6 weeks away from getting those results out to market. It is, and then IP at Mount Boggola, the copper gold antimony project.
Now with that other with the Northern Star project, because obviously you mentioned them about 2-3 minutes ago. Can you provide a little bit more detail on the nature of the copper, the gold targets, and is it as high grade, and is it as significant as what you've just found there at Blue Devil?
Yeah, good question. In photo 1 there at the Mount Boggola announcement, that was announced late November last year. So there's some stunning grades you can see there on that particular rock chip. So that's 16.75% copper and 7.7 grams gold, 40% iron, and there's 2.27% antimony. So that in itself are outstanding. So that's in a high rich, iron rich hosted unit, and hoping that there is some sort of IOCG association with that. So that target's probably 1 stage away from drilling. So we do want to do IP ground geophysics and essentially find some induced polarization conductors there, and that would then be a walk-up drill target, whereas Blue Devil has got the walk-up drill targets. Those anomalies that we have at Blue Devil West and East are drill ready pending the heritage surveys.
Yeah, okay, beautiful. And I guess for those shareholders and potential shareholders listening, Ashley, how would you describe your competitive advantage, and what sort of, puts TechGen out there for those investors that, should be sticking around, should be being loyal?
Yeah, look, on figure 2, Blue Devil, on the announcement I've got on the screen there, it just shows the scale of this magnetic intrusive system that we've got, and the disassociation of the EM sitting below the surface with the historic copper and gold samples at surface. This project, it is the first EM survey done. It's got the geology, the structures, the geochemistry at surface. But the missing layer was this airborne or geophysics full stop, and it's, as mentioned, and as you can see on figure 2 there, it's an outstanding looking target. Previous explorers in their WAMEX reports and their surrender reports and annual reports, there's always mention of the potential of the project for copper and gold. The missing ingredient has always been geophysics. And I guess, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's been probably a cost factor, and the comments have generally been, and it's on open file information, it's been, largely for a larger company to come in and do some geophysics. We're not a larger company, but we certainly are, active and big fans of geophysics, and hence that first mover advantage, hitting these projects with the very first geophysics and clearly identifying this the best target that we brought to market since IPO. That's for sure, Harry.
Okay. Yeah, I think obviously everything you've just mentioned makes a lot of sense, and hopefully it gives shareholders a little bit of confidence moving forward. Just in regards to, I think you touched on it briefly, but in regards to the market cap and the runway for capital, where is the business sitting? Because obviously, investors, they never want to get diluted. They never want to sort of have their shares getting, like I said, diluted. So what is that runway, and how's it looking? You mentioned something about, you've got enough capital to last sort of towards the end of the year. But what's the runway there looking like?
Yeah, the quarterly report is out tomorrow, so that'll disclose all our figures and cash in bank. It's healthy for a junior right now. If this depends on timing and how aggressive we are in the field at Mount Boggola, geophysics and drilling, heritage agreements, it gets through the cash relatively quickly, and the biggest cost obviously is the drilling side of things. So the sooner we can get a rig on the ground, the less chances we need to raise capital. Right now, the runway is healthy. You get towards July, August, September, and you haven't drilled, and that would be a worst case scenario. Obviously, you're going to need to top up at some point, but right now we're certainly happy with capital, and obviously happy with the progress we've got at the moment. So right now, there's certainly no need for capital. Market cap's around $5.3 million.
Yeah, beautiful. And look, you want to be able to see a junior miner sort of have that sort of upside, and not any sort of short to immediate term to raise that capital. One question, actually, I always like to ask when I host these webinars and give you an opportunity to sort of speak to those listening and watching. If there's one thing you'd like shareholders or potential shareholders to know about TG1 and why they should continue to be a shareholder or become a shareholder, what would that be before we wrap things up?
Yeah, we're an aggressive explorer. Like, the funds, the amount of funds that we spend on the ground is, probably a lot more than most junior explorers. The amount of geophysics and drilling programs that we do annually are a lot more, and we turn over our projects. If there's nothing there, we move on to the next one. So I guess the shareholders' value is, we're spending in ground the money. Like, we appreciate where the money comes from. It's not easy to get, and when we do drill the target, we make sure that we've got multiple layers of geophysics, geology, geochemistry, those sorts of things before we drill a target. So we're not just blowing shareholders' money. It is exceptionally conservative, and then bringing these quality targets to market certainly gives the shareholder that better risk of reward, and certainly higher level of success should you hit an economic system, and clearly that's what we're targeting.
Yeah, and I guess being aggressive, you create your own luck. So the harder, the more efficient you are, and the more chance you got of finding something worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the more we drill, the hopefully the more the sooner we find something. And both of these targets are clearly the better targets or best targets that we've had since we've listed. It'll
Yeah,
be
beautiful.
4 years in April now. We do have a strong register, and our top five are exceptionally supporting and have been on board for quite some time.
Yeah, and I guess a little bit about your background, Ashley, before we let you go. Because again, people like to invest in who's behind the business, get a little bit of an idea about who you are. What's your key background, and what sort of confidence can you give to those shareholders that are sort of backing you and putting their money into you?
It's me and my team, Harry. So supported by a robust team of geologists, geophysicists, accountants, and lawyers. And I guess my background is in exploration. I initially started in the field with Anglo Gold as a fields operations person, and then through my business background, I guess the corporate sector came in later in life. So having that operations background, hence being quite frugal on the ground and aggressive with our exploration. Um, that's basically my background.
Beautiful. I mean, you can't run your own ship, right? You gotta have the right people behind you, and everyone's sort of motivated to get to where you need to get to. But Ashley, I just want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man, and for everyone listening, it is recorded. So if you missed a little bit, or if you want to go double check and hear what he had to say again, just jump on our YouTube channel. I'm sure Ashley he'll put that on their socials as well. But Ashley, thank you for your time, and until next time.
Appreciate it, Harry. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks, listeners.
Beautiful. Again, my name's Harry McCaskill, and thanks for another ShareWise webinar.